There we are. Thank you, sir. Call to order the special call meeting for the purpose of reviewing the board goals for 2025. And Alan, I will give the floor to you. And
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
I'll
you.
go ahead and say, while we're beginning here, that as soon as we get through with that, we also will have a workshop considering the budget. And I believe, Christina, you will probably be presenting on that. So we'll take a brief intermission between the two. All right, Alan, thank you.
And for the staff, just where everyone knows, as we get into budget, we might be a little thin on staff. We've had a pretty rampant COVID go through, and then the fire department, Dustin's mom had passed away, and he's actually out of town at her funeral. They were actually having graveside today, and a lot of firemen are there, so I'm not sure someone will be from the fire department. But we'll try to answer the questions best we can, and any questions you have can go into the next board meeting next Tuesday, or workshop. All right, goals. Board, you can, I actually just put a little PowerPoint together. Where we are with the goals, we had 2 previous meetings to discuss goals. And you have 2 sheets that you were just handed. One says rodeo grounds on the bottom. That was a note that we just, that a couple board members had said to me, and I didn't know if that's something you wanted to consider for the future for us to look into. But if you put them long ways like this goal board, this is the list that we started with in the meetings. But as I broke those down, me and Barbara were working with those. On the first page, it says rodeo grounds. The top, it says solar energy and fee structure. If you go over to suggested goals, that tells you how many board members were interested in that going through as a goal. And if you go onto the back page, you could see that you didn't have a lot of, there was only one board member that supported that goal, but anything can be brought back up. We can discuss that. But on the screen, if you look at your long-term goals, one of the things is senior transitional housing is talked about goal, and there's several of you interested in that. I put in progress because community development and myself have had meetings with possible builders that are interested to do something like this. We have to find somebody that's willing to come in and build. So that's where we're at. So that actually is in progress. Gasification, I think the RFQ will actually be done tomorrow, and then that will go through the process, and then that will be brought to the board to see if you want to go forward with a study. And then animal shelter is something we talked about, and if you go back to our last board meeting, the board voted to go forward with the engineering, and that is on Lincoln Street, and the animal shelter will be a part of the engineering where our inventory storage building would be. Improve infrastructure, that's also in progress. Those are things that we're trying to work on daily with master sidewalk plans and street plans, and just trying to make our infrastructure better in the city. We also talked about relocating the police department. Again, that was just brought up in conversation, but I put it on there because more than just a couple of you were interested in that. And then the last one that I have long-term goals is solar. And in front of you, there's a law, which Phil will be happy to talk on tonight. It should be a sheet, it's just a white paper that says Arkansas. This is the law that during some of the conversations that we had, I just want to make sure, I think Christine also sent this to you, was just to talk about the way we were doing it in the city of Siloam Springs. It was so well thought of, it went to the state, and it was actually made state law based off of what we do here. So again, those are our long-term goals. Is there anything that you would want to add? If that's rodeo grounds, is there any conversation? The way I see this, we have a lot of things in progress. So we also have a long-term goal of a park and rec center and community development building. If you'd go to the second page for me. Next one, I'm sorry. Right there, the current goal, recreational community center. We just need to know as a staff where we are with that. Is that a goal that we continue to strive going forward? In the board's thoughts. So we could start back on the first page. Any comment, or where do you want to go with the long-term goals?
I think we all want to see that down the road, but just like with gasification, it's a big old question of can we afford it?
Correct, I
I
agree
mean,
with you.
this is
Director.
kind of on the same level of both are going to take a bunch of money.
Yes, sir. And that's, I think, before where a few months ago, we brought forward possibly doing a study. That's where we did the surveys and came back, and I think we could hopefully, one of the goals that, I can't remember which board member, I could go through here and look, is we're talking about improvements to Benton County in the park. We could also, in that study,
Benton
make that a
Benton
master
Street.
parks plan.
You said Benton County. You
I'm
mean
sorry.
Benton Street.
Benton Street, yes,
Yeah.
thank you. On Benton Street with the park. We could actually add that into a master park and recs plan. But again, we won't know what it costs. You're exactly right, Director, just until we get into it to see exactly what we want. And through the study, if the board wants to move forward, to put money in the budget, to do a study, that is your prerogative.
I don't think we want a study to ask the public, do you want this? Because I don't think there's going to be anybody in town that says, no, we don't want it. Everybody's going to want it.
Well,
But it's a question of a study to see like how much it would cost.
Right, the study,
Yeah.
the study would be a concept plan to see what the design would look like. It would be a plan to, master plan, just get us the things that we want in it and tell us what it would cost. And we know if they come back, because we've heard numbers, 30 million, 40 million. It may come back 10 million. It may be doable in 2 or 3 years, but we won't know without that study. So again, that's kind of where we are there.
and it doesn't seem to me, I mean, Director Rissler gave us 5 pages on January 23rd of citizens and their opinions on, that had reached out to her on the community center. And the majority of them didn't feel like it was a real need right now, that there were other things that were needed, because it is going to be a lot of money. And I personally, I mean, when you gave me a tour of the police station, I mean, they're busting at the seams, and it seems like that should be a priority and a real need over a rec center. So, for what
Madam
that's
Mayor?
worth.
I think a community rec center may have been part of the survey that we did among citizens a couple years ago. Do we remember what the results were then,
Travis, do you remember?
approximately?
Part of the comprehensive plan, I think.
Yeah, that big
yeah.
survey that we did.
But then
of-
didn't Travis do more of an informal one more recently, I think? I don't know. You tell
Oh,
us.
okay, then both.
It did show up on both the 2040 comprehensive plan. That was one of the, I want to say there were 5 recreational goals that came out of that, kind of big picture goals. One of them was a rec center on the east side of town. And then when we followed up earlier this year with Parks Priorities Survey, which we'll be presenting on at the next board meeting, the rec center was one of the top 3 goals that came up from about
That was
1,200,
directly from
1,300.
citizens?
Yeah, and there were about 1,300 that responded.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, Travis.
So I think that may paint a little bit different picture. That sounds like that survey may be telling us that there is interest.
And I can see how it would when it's a survey from the Parks and Rec, but if citizens were to ask, or you were to ask citizens, do you want streets fixed? Do you want this done? Do you want that done? Do you want a rec center? When we look at the overall picture, I mean, what are the priorities? Whereas if they're given, you know, these are the things we're looking at for Parks and Rec, which sounds the best, versus these are the things we're looking at for the entire community, what do we need the most?
Is that how it was worded, of these things, which do you want the most? Okay. Yeah, and I think it depends just so much on who you talk to. You're going to get a different answer from every citizen because every citizen has different priorities. So that's why I have always tried to encourage us to think in terms of not just what we, or just the people that we, you know, our smaller group that we may be talking about, but it's, let me go. I've encouraged us to try not to think of either or, but both and, if at all possible, because you do have, and money runs out. I mean, we don't have the money that we need to do everything, so I get that. But sometimes we kind of say, well, we can't afford this now, so we're not going to do this, and it sounds like we're never going to do it, but maybe it's just not a priority right now, which may be what you're saying, but.
That's what I'm saying.
But it sounds like there is interest.
And I'm not saying never, I'm just, because like you said, everything costs money, and it just might not be like the priority now.
Which I think now it would just be a matter of doing a study to even see how much it costs, because we don't know how much it's going to cost.
I would like to input. I forgot about this. I guess I totally forgot about, oh, no, I mean, I have a copy probably because I keep copies, but I totally forgot about that. But I would like clarification. When she asked you directly if the questions were, do you want this, was it just for Parks and Rec programs, or was it for citywide program? Okay, I think that's what she was wanting to know, the difference. Were you offering citywide and not just Parks and Rec options? And that, it does make a difference. I see it both ways. It does make a difference, but I just want to make sure we're honest in that. It did not include.
Streets would be number one.
Well, exactly. Honestly, if we had to, that we have to be honest with ourselves, and we are talking about citizens' tax dollars, but I just want clarification of her question, because her question was it options? But she meant options for the whole city.
And I think what Ms. Betsy's saying too is just we have to prioritize what the greatest needs are in the city. That's why with me, I'm just coming to you because this was a goal on the, a long-term goal from this board, previous board. Is the board interested in doing a study to see what it would cost us? Because we won't even know if it's doable until we know a cost to even see a concept design. So that's our next step to even start planning if we were going to do this in 3 years, 5 years, or 7 years, because we won't know.
As long as it's a reasonable cost for a study, I'm for it. I'm not in favor of $150,000, $200,000 for a survey or a study.
Yeah, I think the last study we got for a complete study was $220, and I think without the survey, I think it was $181.
100,000, or you're saying 181?
$181,000, yes, sir.
For what was that for?
It was, Travis, can you give us a rundown? I'm throwing you on the spot to run down everything that kind of entailed.
One of the board goals for 2023, 2024 was a conceptual plan for the rec center. And so that would include I'd have to bring up the slide to include everything, but that would be looking at all of our existing facilities, doing an assessment of all of our existing parks facilities, a lot of which are 30 years old, trying to decide what are they going to need for the next 30 years, what would it cost to continue to keep them up to, keep a standard of care that the community's happy with. And then the other part of that would be doing the year-long community engagement of what would the community want in a rec center, what could we support, what sorts of activities in a rec center would the community actually come to, how do those things, a pool is a lot more expensive to build than a fitness room. You look at the return on investment on those sorts of things, what can our community support? And then you ask the question, what would the community, what various methods of paying for a rec center would the community be open to? That's included in that study. And then the study, the proposal that we brought back last year and early this year, it would go so far as getting all the conceptual designs. This is what the building would look like. This is how many square feet you'd have for basketball versus pool. You would know what the building would look like. You'd have a cost estimate. You'd have a business pro forma, operations pro forma, and then you would have some sort of budget number to bring to the public for a vote.
So we have paid for a study for a design, but not for a cost?
So far, we have not paid for anything rec center
okay.
related.
We budgeted for it? Is that what you're saying?
No, there have not been anything.
Well, what were you talking about,
What I
181,000?
came to the board probably, gosh, it's been 3 or 4 months ago, they were wanting to do a budget amendment, and we put that off just due to the cost. I think a couple board members wanted to see us take some of that cost out by doing an in-house survey instead of asking the company to do the survey for us. So that's where the survey came from, to alleviate some of that cost on it.
But what you're talking about would not just be what Travis just told us, it would also include what it would eventually cost to build.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So-
And my understanding was that that design would, I'm not going to say this right, be sort of the first step in even what the architects would do. And so it would, is that right? I mean, it's coming up with,
Yeah, the conceptual design is done by the architects, so if the board moved forward with a rec center, the first step would be hiring the architects, and that was the group that came early this year. That was the architecture firm. Conceptual design is the first phase of the architectural design, and so, you get all the architectural
So we would already have
drawings,
that
all the
part paid
renderings,
for.
all of that would be included in the proposal from earlier this year. So,
Depending on cost, board, we know our pool's getting very, very old, and we're hoping that it'll last a few more years. So we have a conceptual design, and we may say, hey, we're just gonna do the community building and maybe do the pool 5 years later. We could do things in stages. But again, and depending on cost, what the economy looks like, what are our other needs, I understand we have to prioritize. The next step to me with this process is trying to get a conceptual design just where we know what it cost. I didn't put that in the budget last year. Again, we were going to bring it forward as a budget amendment. We didn't get there because of other needs. So that's where I'm at, that I can keep the goal on the list and we could keep moving forward, but the next step is for the board to make a decision. Do we want to pay for a study for this design?
So Travis, you had said the architect would do the conceptual design. Is that the same architect who then we would actually use to build it?
most likely, yes, unless there was something, during that process that we decided they weren't a good firm to work with. But we would get, a good portion of the design done in this phase. So the next phase would be moving into the engineering, like the full construction documents, which is going to get down to, the granular, this is how the building goes together. This gets you very close, but not to something that you can put on the table on the construction site and know exactly, how to assemble it.
Because I'm just trying to picture how the process and how it goes. So it would be a company doing the study, and they would go find an architectural firm, they would do this, they would do that.
Or, no, the company, this is the architecture firm. So the architects, they come into the community. We have multiple in-person meetings and virtual meetings and surveys where the community provides the feedback of, this is what we want in a rec center. The architecture firm goes and does an initial design of here's how you could potentially do it. Here are 3 different ways, 3 different costs. Community meets again, sort of reviews what the firm has worked on, says, hey, we really like option C. They go back, they start pushing further, they come back. Okay, here's where we're at now. This is what this might cost. Here are the ways that the community is open to pay for it. Again, because these are all really expensive projects. In most communities, they require a bond initiative to pay for. And so, throughout this process, you decide, is the community open to a bond initiative to even pay for something like this? If so, how long would it take to repay it? What kind of money is the community comfortable spending on something of this scale? Do you want to, again, do a $4 million pool or renovate the aquatic center? All of that is sussed out through this process. And it's an iterative design process where they take the community feedback, they go back, they work on it, they present again, they go back and work on it, present it again. You slowly get to a design that is, very close to what you can build. You just have to go a little bit further after a bond was passed to, get all of your construction documents in place.
Hire an engineer. An engineer comes in behind the architect.
So then the people doing the study would be the architecture firm.
Correct. So it's correct.
So then would we put out a bid to see who's going to do the study?
What we did last year was we went out through the professional design build services procurement procedure. So that's usually the RFQ, request for qualifications. And we received, I want to say 11 or 12 back. And then those are reviewed based on the specifications in our RFQ. and they're selected based on qualifications. And through that procurement procedure, you select first based on qualifications. You try to negotiate a price that's acceptable. If you can't negotiate a price, then you go on to the next most qualified firm.
So y'all did that process already?
We have, at least for the rec center.
Okay. Thank
Yep.
Right, I just with the rec center, I just looked at it a little different too. I'd like to cut like a rec center / community building. One of the things that we lack in the city right now is finding a large enough venue to, host events and different things like that. So I would like to see that. So again, this is up to the board if we want to keep this as a goal. As we go forward, I want to at least talk about it, that this is one of the goals that we haven't finished yet and still on the table. Any more conversation about that before we go into the new long-term goals?
We have talked for 30 or 40 years in this city of needing a new community building, because the community building that was built so many years ago, 100 years ago, 90 years ago, whatever, you're right, doesn't have the venue space. When it was built, it had basketball goals and all these things that it could be used for. Stage was used. And so we've needed something that is in the city limits that's not just recreational, but gathering place, basically. So it's been talked about for decades. The other thing that was planned, at least 12 to 13 years ago, was when we bought land to move the rodeo grounds, because the city owns the property where the rodeo is. And we thought that land is much more valuable to do something that more people can get to easier, in that rodeoers are going to go wherever it's outside the city limits or wherever. And so we did buy that land off of South Lincoln. And so I was really surprised when it was decided, I think it was decided without much board input, to utilize that for building city structures. And it's fine, because it's needed. Those are needed. I'm not saying those aren't needed, and where we had the property. But I'm not against possibly, if we were to find an economical piece of property outside the city limits, to move the rodeo grounds and then utilize the current rodeo property for better, I'm not saying for better use, but more enhanced, even if it was for a rec center. It may not be enough space for a rec center, but it's so close to the schools. I know the schools have said if we would ever be interested in selling it, they would want it. And then we have also talked that if we were ever able to expand the golf course, that it would be ideal to make a 18-hole. But I'm just saying, I'm not against us looking for additional property to get back to.
No, and I agree, and Christina, you may be able to help me on this. We haven't had a lot of discussions. I agree, the rodeo ground needs to be moved. I would love to expand the golf course. I got some great news on that today. I talked with, I don't want to get into that, I just want to give you a little good news, is where we were last year with the golf course compared to where we are today is $100,000 better than we were last year. So great work by staff and everyone. Have a long way to go. We weren't doing really good, but we are $100,000 better. But one of the things about the rodeo, go ahead.
Just regarding the rodeo grounds, I know that they have replaced a lot of their equipment, stuff that they needed themselves, except for the stands, the bleachers are so out of date. And they told me, I don't know, 6 months ago or something, that they had priced some at $400,000. So they really don't want to move, because they've replaced so much stuff already compared to when we bought the property years ago and was thinking about doing it. They've gone ahead, and so didn't mean to interrupt you, Chief.
No, sir. One of the issues I know they were having is just the money. Do we remember, I didn't think it'd be very expensive to move the rodeo grounds, but you look at it and with everything, the requirements that you have to meet, I'm just not sure how much the rodeo grounds have and how much they could help, how much the city would have to fund. Mm-hmm. So a lot of that is just looking into that. First of all, is finding a piece of property where everyone is comfortable going. Again, I would love for the board to look at buying some property, and I constantly have staff looking and seeing what's out there to bring to the board to see if we would be interested in getting land for these future developments. But again, I would be happy to, if you want to add the rodeo grounds to long-term goals, but we have to decide how much of it are we going to fund.
What's wrong with the rodeo grounds? I mean, I don't know why.
It's just,
I'm not questioning it, I just don't know what's wrong with them.
I think the issues we've had, I don't know, Kevin, we could jump in there. A lot of it is it's just getting very old. They keep trying to add to it, but the concession stand, Mr.
Like
David,
it's
you
too
might be able to tell me how
small,
old
or-
that place
It's
is, and
just
been
that
there
the
a long
land
time.
itself is more valuable to the city, and it's because back when the city leased it for 100 years, that was not really even, I guess that was the edge of the city limits. And so, nobody thought about that or the golf course getting their long-term lease, that we would ever have the big highway there and have so much traffic there. And, I mean, we said in the 90s, the growth of the city is northeast, and that's why we built the fire station out there. And so I'm not saying it's in the way, but it is something that the city could use for other things if we were able to find another place and help them build that was more country, is what I'm saying. It's kind of right in the growth pattern. And, anybody who doesn't believe that our rodeo and the riding club brings in tens of thousands of tourists to Siloam, they are completely off. It does a lot to bring in business for retail and restaurants and hotels. And so there's a ton of people come from out of town to come to our rodeo. And everybody thinks it's just during the summer. It's not. There are other events that the rodeo holds out there. So it's a boon to our city, and people tend to forget we are a rural community. And, yeah.
I'm not questioning, I
Yeah.
think the rodeo
Well, that's the
grounds are
idea
important.
behind
That
it, yeah.
is, that is our history,
Yeah.
that's who we are, but just I didn't understand what the problem is. And if we are going to look for land, it's not going to get any cheaper as time goes on.
The bleachers are in horrible shape, and they really need addressed. And they're not technically a department in the city, but they are. They're on our land. But, so they're going to have to spend the money on the bleachers, and if they're going to spend $500,000 to improve, now's kind of the time. I'm not saying we could easily replace the money if we sold it to the school, and I'm not suggesting what we should do. I'm saying that they're fixing to do a bunch of can't-move
Yeah, once they
improvements.
place that, they're not going to ever want to move, and they'll ride that lease till the very end, so.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
You may have said this, someone may have said this. I thought we had discussed this a few years back, and it was too cost prohibitive for the rodeo themselves to move where we did actually have space that we were encouraging them to
We
consider.
actually did, yeah. And I was going to ask Christina, do you remember what that estimate was? It was, yeah, I knew it was well over 2 million, or, yeah,
That includes the land, right?
no. Yeah.
That was to
put it-
build the new rodeo facility, and it was just too much for them.
Wait, well, yeah.
To build it or to move it, or the whole thing?
Well, I think to Mark's point, I mean, they're not going to move those bleachers. I mean, they would probably just have to I don't know that there'd be anything there that they would move. They'd probably have to start from scratch. I
Right, and
mean, does that sound about right?
Director Allen's comments, it does. We draw a lot of tourists in the city. I really believe we could move that and make it up to date. I think we could double those numbers to do more events. But again, if you, during the fireworks, I walk through the rodeo grounds, I've been there, you walk under the stands, it's not in the greatest of shape.
But to be clear, we wouldn't be moving it. We would be providing space somewhere, land somewhere, but then it would be up to the rodeo folks to actually build their facility, and that's where we came across
But
problems.
we have a lot of people say, why would you do this for the rodeo? Well, why did we build a new library? that went 50% over budget. Why did we provide $1 million for land and build the new soccer fields? Both of those groups were told, if you raise half the funds, the city will provide the other half. And it wasn't possible, and the city stepped in and paid for all of it. So there are, you know, whatever you call it, independent, non-city related groups that we have spent a lot of money. And so there is a precedence there for doing things that you look right at what we recently did. It was it last year, or the year before on the Manna Center. I mean, we basically gave them all that land for them to build. No, the library was completely independent, and we had tried for years to take it in, and the library director at the time was like, no, we will not become a part of the city. And everybody kept asking why, and this was decades ago, but why are you not getting state funding? Because every other library would get, you know, state funding. Well, the lady who ran it did not want to be required to get any books other than what she wanted to get. So it was a big turn when the city did step in, and everybody knew we needed a new library because it was not just building locked, it was landlocked, so you couldn't even really add any. We did a big deal when we put the roof at a pitch because it was about to cause major problems, but, you know.
So I have a question about what you said, Mindy. So we can decide we want to move the rodeo. Let's say we want to go buy land and move it, but it doesn't sound like it's really up to us because we're not going to do the build out unless we make an agreement with the rodeo. So don't we need somebody from the rodeo to be having this discussion with?
That's what I was getting ready.
I spoke with Karen Davis. I think she's still the president, is she? I've spoke to her for 20 years. We've been talking about something to this effect for 20 years. We've sought the growth going there, and this was before the school got there, and it just would be a wonderful place for several different things. I'm just suggesting, just like the community center, we're doing long-term goals. I would really like to see us have a 10-year, long-year goal, and if we moves down and suddenly it's 5 years and we can't do it, well, you push it back to 10. Yeah, just have a moving goal that we always see coming, and we can maybe get it done. Okay, well, we can't build a $40 million rec center today. Maybe if we start putting money back, 2 or 3 million a year, I'm just talking, that's 15 years. In 15 years, we can. So if you don't start planning, then you're never going to get it done. And so we've been talking about the rodeo grounds for years and years and years and years.
And we were talking about it when they really needed a lot of help, and because of the delay, I mean, everybody thought, okay, we got some land on South Lincoln, so maybe we're gonna, but it never went anywhere. And I never really cared for the land because it was a low-lying place in the first place. It was kind of, but nevertheless, it was like, okay, we've made a step, but then nothing came of it. And as Karen has said, they've done so much replacement of their stuff themselves, except for the bleachers, that they're going after that, you know, but that is a major long-term goal for them. I mean, they really cannot just go spend the money. They've got to raise the money to do that. But it's clear from them that once they do that, they're not going to be interested in ever moving.
And I agree with Director.
And really, the only reason was because the value of the property. That's why it was first looked at decades ago, is that it's more valuable to the city. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
I mean, we even said,
No,
maybe we could sell it and make a heck of a profit. That's that was one, like, option before we started saying, hey, we need to hold on to land.
And I understand that, and that makes perfect sense. So if we're going to go out and buy land and tell the rodeo, we just bought land, right, we need to know this is what they want.
That was my point I was getting ready to make. I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is just a process that I brought up. If this is something we're interesting to do, we put it on a goal. I agree as a long-term goal because there's a lot of work to be done. We can't go buy land, and the rodeo said, we don't want to be there. This is because there's something in the ground, our horses don't like it. We've got to pick a place that they're happy with. So I think we're going to have a lot of meetings, find out what it's going to cost, what is the city willing to do, and then go from there. So today, I just need, is this something that you guys want to look at as a long-term goal? Or is this something you want me to bring back next year?
If the other board members do want you to look at it, I would like to see, since it seems to be being suggested that maybe the city do a little bit more than provide the land, what do other cities that have rodeo grounds do? Do cities own the rodeo grounds? Does Springdale, the city of Springdale, do they own their rodeo ground?
Well, Springdale is like
Well,
the
I know.
jewel of North
But there
Ozarks.
are other rodeo grounds and other,
Yeah.
and I'd just be interested in knowing.
Right, because I know at the Arrowhead Speedway, just this last weekend, Friday and Saturday night, they had rodeos out there. Again, I don't know if that's something the city or the rodeo grounds even looking at, going in and owning the rodeo ground. But again, there's so much research to be done. So today, I just want to know, Mayor, if the board wants to vote, it takes 3 to put this as a goal. And we've
But
got to
Chief,
get it.
I think you cannot ever go wrong just looking, not for rodeo, but for the city to own land, if there's land that comes available. Just like we had no clue on this land that had been bought a decade ago for the rodeo, we're now using it for equipment.
We'll find another use for it.
And things that, that we didn't know 10 years ago or 12 years ago, we would be needing. So I'm saying you can't ever really go wrong if something comes available and we have the cash that we can do it. And it's just like, someday we may need this for, as we talking, a possible police and fire combo. Even though we've said if we ever did that, we've already got a lot of land at the airport, but you can't ever go wrong if you see a piece of land, it just,
Hey, Chief Miller,
So,
smile
yeah.
on that one.
Madam Mayor,
So, yes, Reed.
I would like to make a motion that we put this on as a long-term goal, please.
All right. I have a motion to place this on as a long-term goal. Do I have a second?
second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Blair?
Yes.
Long?
Yes?
Hunt?
Yes.
Rissler? Yes. Allen?
Yes.
Carroll?
Yes.
Miles is absent.
So now that we've done this, I just need to make sure that, because this is a special called meeting, that we are allowed to vote.
As my understanding, the way the rules were that when I read through, I think it was Mr. Patterson's memo, it took 3 board members to pass along a goal. The long-term goal, I want to be able to come back and have a record that we were a 6-0 vote to put this on a long-term goal. Is it 3-3? So I'm looking more of making sure we want to make this a goal.
We still have to have a resolution in our board packet to approve all of the board goals.
So
when we're
really,
done.
what we've done is just given you a direction. By this vote, it gives you a direction that you want this on there as a long-term goal.
Correct, that's all I'm looking for.
Gotcha.
And then we'll come back with the resolution.
And Madam Mayor, I would like to go
Yes.
back to our discussion of the recreation center and
Yes, ma'am.
move that we put that down as a long-term goal as well.
All right, do I have a second for that?
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the rec center as a long-term goal. Roll call.
Long?
Yes?
Hunt?
Yes.
Rissler? Yes. Allen?
Yes.
Carroll?
Yes.
Blair?
Yes.
All
Excellent.
right.
All right. Let's go back to our list. I want to make sure you have enough time to look through these, but the long-term goal on senior transitional housing. Again, I'd like to put these, and again, as what Director Long said, hopefully if things with the economy, you'll see the budget today, the way we're doing the budget is we're planning for the worst and hoping for the best. We're hoping the economy will take back off. So let's
Can
fast
I-
forward, the economy's doing
Can
great.
I jump in just for a second?
Yes, sir.
I feel like, and this all started before I got on this board, but I feel like there's some things that are our job to set goals. And I think what we did just then was right. But there's some things I don't know that that are more suggestions as opposed of a direction that we should be giving. So to just say, hey, I want you to work on the crosswalk is more of a suggestion, or maybe that's not the best example, reduce utility fund reliance. That is a really good suggestion, but I don't know that it is a goal or a policy. Is it? I mean, is that what we should be, that's more of a, hey, Alan, start working on this for us, please, as opposed to, here's our 10-year goals. You understand
I
what
would
I'm
agree
saying?
with
At
you
the
because
last vote-
I'm sorry, go ahead, Ms. Lisa.
At the last goal meeting, we discussed, some of these are goals, actual goals, and some of them are suggestions. And then we separated them out. And so we separated them out because sometimes we can't get together. So sometimes our only communication, because we can't come together, is making that list. And even though it's not a goal, we want it heard. We want it heard
Right, right.
somewhere.
And I agree, I don't know that,
Well, that's why they're on there. And they got removed, but they got discussed also. And it made it easier to discuss them. So that's why he gave you, I'm sorry. I did not mean to cut in. We did have that discussion at the last goal meeting
Yeah,
of why they're on
and
there.
again, a lot from that discussion, we had a long list, and staff has already started working along that, a lot of the list, like, speeding and working on the traffic at schools, the signage. Those are things we do every day. So that's why I picked out these. Again, is a senior trend, the transitional housing, that is something that's been talked about. I know it's near and dear to some folks. The big thing there is we got to find someone that's willing to build it for us, is coming in and can they make a profit, and this is what we want built. So we're in that process. So again, do we want senior transitional housing as a goal? Again, we're going to have a longer list because we're going to have a long-term goals. I'm a long-range planner. I plan 5 to 10 years out.
Well,
You're
if-
saying that this is something everybody wants, and we do because we don't have enough of it. And there's more than enough of us on this board that are going to be needing to take advantage of that senior housing pretty soon, that I think we do need to have it as a want and a goal, but it's not something the city is going to go spend money on to build those.
That's my understanding.
The city can, as you put in the parentheses there, incentivize developers if we decide to do that. But it's not like we can, like if we do a rec center, we could go build a rec center. But it's not like we can go build senior housing.
Yes, you are correct.
But your direction for him is that you
Yeah,
do want him
yeah.
to pursue that if
As
there is a
something
developer out there.
To
Yes.
incentivize
Yes,
developers.
that the city would support that. The directors would support that.
So I'm hoping none of us are ready right now, but it'd be nice to kind of, hey, we're going to go into a smaller house than kind of a condo, then into more of a care facility. That's what I think we're talking about, transitional housing.
Can we possibly not pay for a study, but have an informal phone poll to our other city leaders to say, do you guys have any kind of incentivization for senior housing? It's just a question.
We're actually in that process.
Yeah, okay, good. I think that would certainly give us a direction as to how to go about accomplishing what we're saying we want.
We don't have a lot, when we talk about this, I don't have enough answers for you. So
Yeah.
again, we're out seeing, hey, what are you doing in this city? Hey, how can we incentivize this to bring you here? And we've had a couple conversations with builders, and hopefully we will find more, because there's not a lot of experts in this field. So Mayor, do you want to get me a count on that or a vote on that? If anybody wants to put that on the long-term goal.
We can. I just kind of think that maybe it might be like an informal type, because they're just giving you direction
You can
that
just,
they want you.
you can give me a hands raise. I'm just
Absolutely.
trying,
So-
but I want a record.
Right.
5 years from now, I have a new board come in, and I said, hey, I had 6-0 vote. This is what we want.
want you to explore and get with.
Correct.
Yeah. So, yes, Betsy.
So do goals then always have to be something like we're putting money into? I mean, because it sounds like if we're just given direction, we're saying that's not a goal, or it is a goal?
And that's totally up to you all. I mean, I didn't know if you wanted to actually formalize,
I'm not sure this is something we can budget for.
we can't budget for it,
Unless
right?
we wanna,
This is
make a
more of
design.
but you want to direct them to do that. You want
Right.
staff to be aware that you support that, and whenever they bring that to you, then that is something you want to work on and help get
Time-
done. So if you all want to make that one of your goals, to give that support to them, then
I think it's more of a policy, and time and again, our board really doesn't have a say on policy. This is
Right.
something I think we could put on the list and say, this is a goal, even though it's really a change of policy to incentivize. It's going to be something that you're going to have to bring back to us.
Have to come back to you anyway, yeah.
So, but I think it should be a goal, because I think we're trying to look at what does the city need? And that is something the city needs.
Then
I
by
think
all
you're
means.
spot on,
Yeah.
Director, because this is something you guys will just, we'll have to come back to you to see what you're
Right.
willing to put in an incentive package.
So,
Well, I'll make a motion that we
Okay.
make in aging, or not aging housing, what is it called?
Transitional
Senior housing.
My house is aging.
Why don't we just raise hands? Who would like to see this? Raise your hand.
I'll do that for now.
I think David just made a good distinction. It's a goal if it's something that we see as something that the city needs, whether it's going to cost us or not. I mean,
and if
that
we
seems to make sense.
incentivize.
It takes staff time.
You may be something you consider a cost to the city if it's, depending
Right.
on what you decide, how you want that to look.
If our employees are doing electric and gas
Yeah.
and sewer,
Yeah.
that's a cost on the city.
Yeah.
It might not be that we're paying the developer, but we're paying our employees.
Good point.
And I've said this before, because transitional housing, I understand you're downsizing, but in my mind, that also includes, assisted living.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's one of the stages.
yeah, okay.
One of the developments that was actually presented to us a few years ago had that as the last, kind of the last stop.
Before
Before well,
long-term care, assisted
long-term
living.
care, right, there was
Yeah.
assisted
I just,
living.
every time other people bring it up, it's not, that part's not mentioned, and so I just want to make sure
But it
that
was
that's
the-
included.
It was the second goal on the list that Barbara sent us today from our previous meeting. And it had 3 board members suggest it, and I wasn't listed, but I definitely support it. Traditional housing for aging citizens, or transitional, when I say traditional, transitional housing. It was certainly one of Reed's most important that he brought up first, and it's a need. So I think it needs to be on the goal list, whether it be a short-term goal that is brought to us within the next year to put out incentivization, or whether it's simply a long-term that staff shoots for.
And as we say, long-term, that could go, long-term could be a year, 2, 10 years. Again, if we can find a builder and find a good incentive package, that will be brought to you directly to see if you're interested in it. So. hey,
Well, I
Jim,
think we don't need to wait for a developer. We need to go ahead and decide, as you said, you're doing the research with other cities. Go ahead and decide if there's a incentive package we can copy from another city to say, this is here, maybe this bait will attract a developer. Yeah. So I say short-term because I'd rather us go ahead and put it into effect as soon as we can.
Just for the record, just say 6-0 show of hands, just where we have it for later.
Yes.
All right,
Madam Mayor?
And she
let's
has
move on
that
to,
in the minutes.
like gasification, this is another one. Is this really a,
We already approved the study?
well, we approved the study, but it's going to have to be brought because I found an issue with the study, so we had to do a brand-new RFQ, so I will have to, depending who we pick this next time, I will have to bring it back to you again. So again, the gasification, we're looking at the study, and and then we'll review the study, and then we'll decide if this is something the city needs. So kind of, that's something we're working on. So again,
So that's a
do I list
long-term
that as a
goal?
goal?
You want to put that as a short-term or long-term goal for?
It's got to be long-term
It
because
has to
we,
be long-term, because even if we go with it, it's going to take
It'll take a
several
while.
years to get it.
Sure, okay. So for that, would you like a motion? That this board agrees?
Show of hands,
Okay,
6-0
show of
if
hands,
that's-
okay.
Or whatever the number is.
We have 6.
Okay.
In
Then moving
support.
on to animal
And
shelter.
I'm not sure, though, the one who's not here, I'm not sure if he would support this.
He's probably
Well,
totally
we have a
against it.
majority, so we're good.
I'm going to 6.1. I can't give it a full vote. Going to the animal shelter, and again, these are in no order. As I was sitting at my desk, I just started typing these this morning. Animal shelter, I know, is near and dear to a lot of people in the room. It is an issue, our animal shelter, even though we put in our budget for a new roof, and that's helping. I would love to get an animal shelter built, and
But where did you recently tell us you were considering? Out where?
Lincoln.
The the
Yes, sir,
equipment
Lincoln.
warehouses and everything, yeah.
yes, sir, yes.
How many acres do we have there? More than enough
You remember, Kevin?
to add the warehouse and any other stuff, right?
Was it 20, 21?
I was thinking it was 20,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's what we were talking, and again, I would love to remodel the old building for sanitation,
Yeah.
you know, to use that for there, because that's one of the issues we have there. We
To
don't-
find out we've got one bathroom for 20 men at that department, that's not acceptable.
We actually have two, one ladies' room and one men's, but I don't know who's, but yes.
But I'm just saying.
One
I'm
men's
saying,
bathroom,
yeah,
you are correct.
yeah.
So that's something we definitely, again, I would love to put a long-term goal. And with these, I may be able to come back and say, hey, we found a grant.
Yeah.
You know, these are things we're constantly looking for. to
Was there
see what we
something
can
else
apply for.
besides animal shelter? You said you were thinking of combining out there. I thought there was some, like
Yeah,
a
that
couple of
was
different
the
functions.
inventory warehouse.
Well, yeah, but I thought there was some other department or something that was going to be
There was
next
a-
to the animal shelter.
Yeah, there would be a building for water services.
Okay.
And then also potentially a fuel farm and
That's
wash
right.
bay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fuel farm is very important too, because right now, if we do relocate and we sold that piece of property to move somewhere else, we got to have a fuel farm somewhere else. And I know as the former chief and chief in here, we don't like the fuel farm being there. It's just really hard to maneuver fire trucks and sanitation trucks in and out of that traffic. I'm really surprised we don't have more vehicles hit. So again, I'd like to see that. So animal shelters, that's something we want to put as a long-term goal. Show of hands. Or Mayor, I'm taking your job, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I think it's
I
6-0 again.
counted 6.
Yeah.
How many are we wanting to get on this list?
I guess it's been some good conversation. The improved infrastructure, I don't think that should be a goal. That's something that you're just coming to me and say, hey, Alan, we really need to work on this, and this is something we're striving to be better and better every day with the plans that we're having and the work. Hopefully I'm not going to be wrong, but everything that this board budgeted for last year should be finished this year. That is our goal right now. So again, that's something we're always striving for, to improve infrastructure. So that's something I think that's my job. So if you see something, we have a master streets plan, and during budget, we'll let you know what streets we're looking at, and you'll have input on that, on priorities, and we'll be planning on fixing those. So again, I really don't think that's a goal unless you guys have a different opinion.
I think there's a few others that fall into that category that maybe we could just mark off the list right away.
Well, but he was going by the slide, I thought.
Yeah, I'm just going by the slide, and then I'll go into short-term goals right after that. Relocate police department, we had very little conversation. I know it's a goal, or it could be a goal.
At least look at land. Let's look at purchasing land.
Yeah, we got to look at the land to see what we're doing before we go there. I'd like to come back to this later.
Yeah.
I don't think
I'd
there's
like
a
it to stay on
problem.
the list so it doesn't get dropped off the list.
This could be one of the, we talked about 5 to 10-year goals. It's not going to be overnight, but if, it feels like if we don't start making a plan now,
I think
Oh, well,
we
next year,
need
next
something
year.
on fire and police on the east side of town. And we've talked about a combo station out near the airport because we already own land. But I think as much money has already gone into the current police department location, I think it's really hard to just say, yep, we're going to buy some land and we're going to build a new police station when we've already got such an investment right there. And the reason we have the investment is because nobody else wanted it. USA Drug was selling it, they were selling it at a good price, and no one else was buying it, even though we could say, oh, it's a great retail, we need to sell that for retail. No one else was willing to put retail into
How
it.
long was it on the market, though? Sometimes you have to sit and wait for that. That's a great,
That wasn't up to
Revenue
us, Lisa, it was up to
generating
USA Drug.
But they had it on the market for, what, 2 years?
And,
too.
and it's
It
not
was
up
a
to the city,
so are
it's
you
up to the
saying you
city
want
to
us to
say.
keep putting money into this police department and build another building and then potentially never? and
I
then
haven't
busting
heard
at
that
the
as a
seams?
suggestion. It kind of looks landlocked to me.
No, but one of the, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I was just trying, I see where you're going. Kevin, we actually reached out to see what the land is worth in case we did want to go this direction. Do you remember what that was? Was it 2.5, or Chief, do you remember?
I think Chief may.
Chief Miller, the quote that they gave us was 2.8 million, is what the current property value was estimated at.
What, and when was
Before
that?
you leave.
2.8.
You mean the
Before you
current
leave,
police
Randall.
station is what you're talking about?
Before you
That
leave.
includes the lot, the grass lot right behind that. That would be all the property in that area, correct, Chief?
But we've had discussions that you've wanted to put another building on that property. Which, should we even invest if we're going to be thinking
We
about?
put that on hold.
Yeah, we looked at that this year. It was budgeted, we budgeted $500,000 to put a building on there for training and some additional offices. But when we looked at it and we started getting into it, it was going to be $2 million instead of $500,000.
It's not like putting the training center for the fire station where we've got a lot of extra land. I mean, where you're at now, it's a limited amount of land.
Not only is it a limited amount of land, but Kevin will probably, even when we looked at putting that building, we had to make a lot of exceptions for the land use
Yep.
and all this other stuff, because it basically becomes a big concrete pad for drainage and everything else. Plus the public access is very
Right.
limited where we're currently at.
I
So
think it's
what would
fine
you
to
would
leave
call-
the station there. I just don't think we need to put a lot of investment into expanding it or anything.
But
If
if we're
we're going to
not-
expand a training center or whatever, we need to look, can't we look elsewhere for a it doesn't have to be right there for a training
I
center.
mean,
does
there
it?
are multiple options that we can look at as far as annex buildings or whatever, for office space or whatever, leasing them, or whatever. It's just we are currently out of space.
Right.
So, just ballpark, if we was gonna build a new station, and we own the land, forget the land, how much would it cost?
It depends on whether you're just talking a police department, if you're talking about the combination,
I know,
you're
just
looking
like-
at about $20 million to $30 million.
If I could, Chief, I
today's-
built a police department in 2014, and at that time, it was 10.5 million.
But now, Chief, you're talking about a whole new station.
Yeah.
Correct.
I was talking about like a police substation / training center that was second to the main station. That's what I was,
And that is certainly an option if we can find a building that's for lease or something like that, but then you're probably paying a couple $1,000 to $3,000 a month for the space and whatever infrastructure you have to put in that space. So it's going to come with an additional cost as well. It comes with some supervisory challenges when your staff is separate also.
yeah.
So not ideal.
So again, do we want to make this a long-term goal to looking at relocating and looking at land? And again, this could be 2 years out, could be 10 years out. Again, there's a lot of needs coming up, and I'll share some. And I had a meeting with RDOT the other day, because one of these short-term goals is actually a crosswalk over 412, which is supposed to start next year. But we also have Lincoln and Kenwood, where we have a lot of accidents. RDOT wants to come in and fix that, but our cost alone is $6.5 million. And we have to make a decision soon, because that work would start at the end of '25 or early '26, Kevin, I'm trying to remember.
What was the location, Chief?
Kenwood and Lincoln. It'd be a total revamp of that intersection because
But the other
as they
one
come
was
off
horrible.
Lincoln and going out to 412, we have a lot of near misses and a
I
lot
think
of
you
hits.
lot
mentioned
of wrecks,
another one,
actually,
too.
I'm sorry.
I think you mentioned another cross, too, before that one. Did you just say another?
Well, you
cross?
said
Yes,
412,
would
but-
be at Tony at wastewater, we're having some equipment issues that we're gonna have to redo, and we're slowly doing it, but that total revamp, we're looking at what, 20 million, Tony? Or more?
No, I think Mindy was talking about, you mentioned another overpass.
yeah, I
another
think-
The
crosswalk.
overpass at 412, what it is when you're coming to Lincoln,
No, I thought you mentioned something besides Lincoln, right before you
Like
said Lincoln.
Mount
Did-
Olive and 412, or somewhere
it?
on 412.
We have, I mean, they are looking at, and we've talked to RDOT about that
What I thought.
intersection right there at Progress and 412. Is that not correct? And they have,
It's a
actually
horrible
talked
intersection,
about
but is there a
design
lot
for
of
that?
actual walking traffic there?
Kevin Moore, City Engineers. So there's two intersections we've had recent discussions with RDOT about. One being Progress 16 and the Highway 412 intersection. I believe the cost to the city for that one was close to 3.6 million. That's after federal funding, partial match, and state funding, partial match.
What would it entail, an overpass to bypass the whole intersection, or just refigure the intersection?
Their initial proposal was 2 additional northbound lanes on that south side by Arvest. And then, so you have to, a lot of the cost was utilities and then relocating the signals that are there so that you could properly widen that intersection for the traffic that exceeds today. The other intersection is Kenwood and Lincoln, Highway 59. And part of why the discussion has kind of been brought forward on that one is that RDOT is separately rebuilding the bridge that goes over Highway 412, and they have offered at no cost to the city to do a side path along one side of that, so that gets us our 412 north-south pedestrian crossing.
You're talking about the overpass near Jetstream?
Correct,
Yeah.
yes.
That-
So, and directly north of that is that Kenwood intersection with
Right.
all the accidents. So they have identified that as an intersection that needs a signal now. But the
Good,
cost
for a
of
whole
that-
signal, good,
Yes,
good.
yeah.
Needs it bad.
There have
and
been
that-
about,
That cost was the 6.5 million or so.
it's like 21 accidents in the last 3 years.
Oh, yeah, no, it's really.
So we're looking, and it's a big cost, 6.5 million, but the good part of that is they will do the side path in the bridge for free, at no cost to the
For
city.
people to walk over. the
To be
bridge.
for bike paths and
Yeah,
walking.
yeah,
At
good.
no cost to the city. So if you actually take that project, if you're looking at a $15 million project with both, that we would get approximately for about 6.5 million.
And as we have those discussions, if the timing works out well, they would do that as one project instead of coming back later to do them separately.
And we, electric, we had just got together, and RDOT called me today that we will be looking at doing some of our lighting and intersections. They're going to do a traffic study. They're actually should be letting me know something shortly. We had another discussion
Well,
about it today.
I've had a lot of complaints about our timing of lights, especially on Sherry Whitlock, just backing up for miles because the north-south is not near as, but they're like timed the same amount. And
That's something
so,
we'll take a look at, be happy to if you have something like that. But again, those are things we're constantly working on daily. So let's go back, thank you, Kevin.
I have a
So,
question for Chief Miller, because we were talking about the police department. Well, so you're busting at the seams now, so how are you handling the busting at the seams?
So typically, right now, we are doubling people in certain offices, putting more than one person in each office.
and what,
And
and
That a
what,
doable workaround for now, or I know it's
now.
less than
For now, I mean, it's
desired,
working.
but.
But
pieces of evidence do you now have, Scott? That was one of our biggest issues when I was there.
some of the police officers are operating in the jail cells.
Well, you know,
I mean.
you're
well,
not wrong.
And aren't you using closet space for offices and?
Yes. So to go back to your evidence question, we are roughly, I think, please don't quote me, I'm going by memory, but I think we are somewhere in the neighborhood of 7,000 pieces of evidence, and that's with Chris destroying somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000 pieces of evidence a month.
Oh, my goodness, wow.
How old is that facility for us? How long have
We
been
purchased that facility in 2014 is when we moved into that facility.
there? It was 10 years old.
That's when they moved from up here.
Right.
Yeah.
And we did not gain any square footage from the old building to that building.
Really?
We just got a newer building.
A remodel that's helped, and we have a jail that's taken up approximately 1,800 square feet that we're not using, so we even talked at one time at remodeling that. But that's probably $1 million just to come in to have all that concrete and cells moved. So
We got.
Chief and I were talking, and we want to put money into this when we're thinking about moving in 4 to 5 years, so.
The estimates just to demolish the jail area was $300,000. Just to demo it, not to put anything back in it.
It just seems to me like this is a real need, and like I've said, we need to start on something now. And as a citizen, and I think you mentioned as far as access in and out, if you've ever been a citizen who has been stalked in a potential carjacking and you try to get into that police station, good luck. So, yeah, just even the
You gotta
safety
go down,
of.
find do a U-turn, come back and do a new U-turn.
Yeah, yeah. And it's a little terrifying. So,
You mean to try to get there right when
right,
it's
to try,
happening?
to try to
Oh,
get
okay.
there when you're being followed because somebody wants to
Yeah.
carjack you.
They got to go down to Walgreens and make a U-turn.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, to me, even that's a public safety issue, trying to get into the police station. And it wasn't here that happened. Thankfully, where it was, I was able to get to the police station quickly, but it made me think about being here.
Well, I will make a motion that we put relocate the police department as a long-term goal.
Show of
Yeah,
hands, sorry, Mayor.
are we going to raise hands like we have been? So let's just
However
raise
you
our
want to
hand.
do it, I just
Yeah.
need a count.
So we've got 6 that
See,
are
I don't
in
think
favor of that.
people think of the police department the way they do the fire department, but they should, because as a city expands and gets bigger in an area, they need to have more than one police department, because you cannot just expect the officers to take off from one location and get further and further and further away when your city expands. It's like you have multiple fire departments.
And as we grow, it gets worse, so
So
we've talked about
that's why when you
substations.
first brought up doing the dual station at near the airport, because we have land, I thought that was ideal. Just because it's where the city's growing, that's the direction it's going. And so, when we put that fire department out on Sherry Whitlock, we said, well, we know Gates is there and Walmart was about to build, and eventually we got the overpass because we did have problems with fire truck having to wait for a trade, that kind of stuff. So the city's growing in that direction. I just think we need to have a plan. I just did not want us to relocate the police department just because that land is valuable for retail space. So
And
we
if you
got
haven't-
it because it was a good deal at the time.
I know when I was there, and I know Chief, he's had a few, if you guys want to come down, he'll open his doors and be happy to give you a tour where you can see it yourself, because it's getting smaller, and as we grow, because again, 4 or 5 years ago, we were 40 officers, now we're 50, 51, 52 officers, so, and a lot
And in
more cars.
2014, it probably was a lot less than that.
Yeah, we had fewer officers then, so I mean, it was ideal. I would say more than anything, my concern with the location is not necessarily the value or anything like that. It's the access that the public has, because we hear about it all the time. It's hard to get in or out of there, especially if you are in some kind of crisis or emergency. But more importantly is our response. Our response is limited at that location because of how 412 is, and we've had multiple accidents with police cars with lights, sirens, everything going, trying to clear that intersection, which leaves us back to other roadway paths, which are residential, and that worries me when we're having to run lights and sirens down a residential street to get to an emergency.
Well, I was
Residents aren't
involved
happy.
when we first entertained the idea of that location, and it was never meant to be a long-term solution. It was a stopgap, and it was a decent price, and it worked. So it's just, we're ever growing, and it's time to look to the future again. So
we won't look at a residential area again, will we? Because the residents in that area are in my ward, and they do not like it right there. They don't like having,
The blue lights and sirens going off at 6 o'clock.
in the middle of the
morning
night, yeah,
testing.
no. They, it's like a train. They should get used to it, right?
Mary. So we're getting short on time, guys. Again, we will take as much time I just want to get to budget. So do we want to do conversation about solar? I put solar on here because
I
that was
do.
brought up. I
Oh.
got Phil. If you want to come up, Phil, he'll be able to answer any questions because he's kind of the man when it comes to that. I'm sorry, Miss Lisa, if you want to, again,
I
I
was
put
just going
solar
to
on it
say,
'cause it was brought up.
I put that on my list, and to save time on discussion, I just wanted to say that I'm okay having conversations outside of these meetings. I'm not sure if it needs to be a long-term goal, but I don't want to ignore the conversation, because there are solutions that other cities have tried and have been successful, and I would like to have those conversations, whether it's a goal or not.
So we'll do that. We can set up a meeting with yourself and staff and sit down and talk about solar unless anyone else has any input. And we do it as a workshop or however you want to do it, a special call meeting, and we can have more conversations going forward. Phil's got a little bit of data that he may share if you want to ask him questions.
I have questions. I have a few things. Because I also think we're talking about two different solar changes. Like I know you've talked about energy farm type thing and,
Oh.
well,
I don't know who brought that up. My thing was, just like some of these other cities did, is for economic development, you ask companies that want to come in and they want to be green, and there's citizens that want to be green. And so
Right.
we're buying it from these citizens. But if we sell it from these citizens at a cheap cost, and then we're selling it back to them at a higher cost, that's where the frustration is. And I agree with that frustration. But sometimes what cities have done is they've had these green customers come in and buy it at the more expensive cost so that we could give a higher cost to these solar customers so that it's more fair. It's a more fair playing ground. Do you see what I'm saying? Because you actually have companies that will come into your community just because you sell green energy. And so,
and that's, I used the wrong terminology, but yeah, that's what I meant versus like I don't like our policy that it makes it not beneficial for citizens to get solar panels. And I know it was said that, it was such a good policy, the state decided to do it. Well, it's detrimental to citizens. I mean, there's no point in going out and buying the solar panels if you have to sell it all back and you barely make a profit off of it. And I know in the last goals meeting, we talked about, well, then the city's providing the infrastructure and how does that work? So I asked one of my friends in Kansas City who, she has Evergy as their energy company. And she says there's an extra fee every month that pays for infrastructure. She still gets to use her own solar. She sells back to the city what she doesn't use, or she buys from the city if she needs extra in the summertime, but she's always charged an infrastructure fee to pay for that. And I read the state statute all the way through, and I found it very not clear. So I was surprised at how difficult I found it to be. So I wondered if you could help put it in layman's terms, please?
Sure can. Basically, they use the terms net metering is what we've kind of grown up with. And net metering means somebody can buy a solar panel and put it on their house. And anything that is left over, the net, goes to the city. And the city would pay the solar owner at the rate that they're charging their residential customers. And so that was basically net metering. So anything left over the house didn't use, the net, then the city would pay the solar owner at the residential rate.
What happened to our policy? Because that's not what we have, is it?
And so we looked at that policy, and all kinds of red bells and whistles went off, because if you do that, then you're losing a lot of money. And I crunched the numbers, and if we have 8 customers currently on our new policy, and you look at their usage, and we would have lost $5,500 if we had not changed to buy all, sell all. And so the city saved $5,536 by changing from net metering to buy all, sell all.
So I'm going to make up numbers. We're going to say 10 is what things are what residential customers pay. I know, like my friend, for instance, when Evergy buys from her, and again, I'm making it up, we'll say they buy it from her for 5 and they sell it to customers for 10. I mean, why isn't that an option? The city could still make money. They're buying the extra that's left over, so the citizen still gets to use their own solar. And then the city buys the extra for, I don't know, even 3 cents and sells it for 10 cents. That's still making a profit. I mean.
Well, in the buy all, sell all, what we do is we buy everything that the solar panel produces. Okay? And then we pay that solar customer the rate that we would have paid our supplier, which is GRDA. So we're buying everything at our avoided cost. And right now, we're paying like 4.2 cents, I believe it is. And then we sell the customer everything that they use at our rate, which is 10.1 cents.
So you buy it back, or you buy their leftover?
No, we're buying all. It's a buy all, sell all. We buy every bit of their solar.
Well, I just heard that if we did net metering, we were losing money. How much, I was trying to write down notes. How much were we losing, Phil? I'm sorry.
$5,536 is what we would have lost.
Per customer?
No, for the 8 customers that we looked at.
That's if
All
we-
8 customers?
Like
We
But
were-
that's if we bought it at the rate that the city was paying the other utility office. We could have bought it at a cheaper rate and did net metering, and bought it at a cheaper rate and sold it at a higher rate and still made a profit. We just,
What I'm trying to say is, we lost $5,500 for 8 customers.
For the year.
Okay. My point here is, in the years past, we have had board members demand our city be green energy, even suggesting every city vehicle be electric. If we wish to have any customers, any citizens use solar energy to try to have renewable energy, we shouldn't be punishing them. And we have been called the solar desert of the state of Arkansas. We have had solar companies say, sorry, I can't deal with you because it's not going to do you any good. I don't think we should have a policy when that is what we hope to do, is have more renewable energy. We either need to have a policy to do that, or we don't do any solar. And so I just hate the city having a reputation and a black eye because of not doing what most other cities do on their solar energy.
I have to say, well, this came before us before. Mindy Hunt is the only one that voted no on that. And I see why she voted no, and I agree with her 100%. The information we were presented at the time, we were told this was the only option. Then we found out afterwards that was not the only option. And then to find out and understand and study with these other cities, that feels deceptive that we did this to the citizens. And I feel like we have an obligation to make it right. And when I make a mistake, I'll say it publicly, I made a mistake, and I made a mistake on that vote. That was a bad vote on my part because I obviously did not do my research. I do it now, but I obviously didn't do it good enough then. And I agree with Director Hunt's vote on that we should have done a more net metering and did it at a, where the city didn't lose money, but we paid for it. We paid them, and that only what they didn't use, and then made a profit off of that at a rate that we could have made a profit.
Well, since
It
I've
didn't
been
have to
on
be a
this
huge
board,
profit.
since I've been on this board, 3 board members, Mindy, you, and me, have asked that this policy be reexamined, looked at, workshopped, whatever, to have a better understanding of it. Simply because we've had a lot of citizens, one in particular, who makes this very, very open knowledge that he's disappointed and that it's not helping the citizens. And as I told, I still want to say Chief, but Alan the other day, we wouldn't have a city if we didn't have citizens. And we've got to be able to look at things and say, this was a bad idea. And from what I gathered at the time, that it was all about, we just can't lose money. We just can't lose money. If you're going to
Madam
have
Mayor.
something as a desire to do renewable energy, there may be a cost to that.
Madam Mayor, I think I recall that it was also a concern that our non-solar customers would end up having to subsidize the solar customers, which I understood that. My feeling at the time was that as much as I like being proactive, I didn't feel like with the 27 houses that we had using solar power then, and I appreciated that we did grandfather them in. So you're saying since then, we've had 8 additional customers that fall under the new policy. I just didn't feel like we were at a point where, even though it was proactive, we needed to make that change. And that was one of the things that, when I was going door to door a couple of years ago, that came back as a question and a concern, so.
One thing
And
you
I
might
think-
be aware of is the 40 grandfathered customers that we have now. We have 40 solar customers who are grandfathered. And currently, we're losing $27,000 a year by them having the net metering policy.
To change the math of that then. We need to look at our ordinance on that and say, okay, our math isn't working, and let's find a solution that works. We don't want it to cost the other citizens, but it shouldn't cost the people that are on solar either to have, because they've already invested a lot of money into that. So I agree with you. We need to look at the ordinance, I think.
It sounds
And
like
that's-
we need to have a lot more conversation, so I will set a meeting. Phil, if you want, and this is a board, and we discussed it at budget, Phil's actually found a study that we can do that's very reasonable. I know we don't like hearing the study, but you guys will like this number, $12,000. Kind of tell them what that study is, Phil, if that's something we're interested in doing.
Yeah, we have a water storage area by our electric department on the south part of town. And we've had providers give us an estimate of what it would cost to put floating solar on that water storage area. And we come up, there's several numbers out there, but there's some government grants that are available to do that. And so this company that we've talked to, they've done other studies for us. And for $12,000, they can look at what our return on our investment would be with the grants available to put floating solar on that water storage area out there. And also, there's community solar programs that you can actually, instead of a customer putting the solar on their roof, they would actually buy the panels on the water, and it would be the same type of credit that's available as if they had it on their roof, if the board decides to go that route. So it's just there's a water storage area that the land is not being used for nothing but water, and you know how expensive land is here. Why, if you could use that to float solar on, it looks pretty attractive. So this company will do this study for us for 12,000. They have our numbers already, and so it wouldn't be a huge deal for them to do it, and they could give us an idea of what the investment would be.
And as we go forward, say we have a conversation a month or 2 month, we can do a budget amendment for that, if that's something we're interested. But I think we need to have a lot more conversation, so we're gonna
I
move
would
forward.
be-
I'm sorry, Mayor.
I was
I'm
just going to
sorry.
say, so with that in mind, do we want to just say that that's something you're going to bring back to us, or you? Yeah.
I would like to have, just to get more
and-
follow-up, and
Right.
again, I want to really look into it. Phil and I had a meeting the other day, just talking about this and seeing what direction the board wants to go.
And then we
I
can,
just-
once
lot
we
more
set
research.
that meeting, and you can bring all that back to us, and then they can decide what kind of a goal they want to make that. If they.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I think we need to include in our study, this deal with solar goes far beyond, in my opinion, just metering, net metering, whatever, buy all, sell all, because people are stepping into this and they're investing in solar. And then let's say in 3 years, they want to sell their house. We're finding lots of difficulty there. Or let's say in 5 years down the road, they need to put a new roof on. And you got to take the solar off, put a new roof on, then put it back on. Now, what Phil was talking about on the water, that would be good. But there are so many things that are happening with solar that are bringing additional expense to the people, and they're being touted as, it's almost a gold mine. But when you put it to practical application, in many instances, it's a money pit. And so I'm not saying I'm against solar. I am against people stepping into something, into an arena where they think it's going to be wonderful, to find out that it's not. And I think we need to have that be part of the discussion so that people have that thought. In the United States, people stay in their homes 8 years, some more, some less. But if you step in with solar, are you going to have an ROI of 8 years on it? Are the people that want to buy the home going to have that, or do you have to have that expense of taking that down? So anyway, there's much more to it, and I think we need to be aware of it and not act like it's just a buying and a selling part, but there's so much more expense-wise to the owner of it.
Thank you,
That's
Director Harrell. That's why I think we just
I
have a
would like
lot
to
more discussion. I'm sorry.
Maybe suggest we come up with a committee. See, I didn't know that. I don't know that there shouldn't be a committee. We meet at the schools or something and.
To research to research the solar?
Yeah, but, because I did not know that at all. Obviously, we're not electrical experts. I get that we don't want to pay more than we're paying now for electricity. And but I don't even understand the whole buy all, sell all thing, so.
Yeah. I didn't know until Reed, you brought that up, that people that sell their homes have to, or replacing the roof. That's all new to me. I had no clue.
Whole new deal.
There's people that get in debt doing this. And we, just like we have an educational program for recycling, what about having an educational program for solar? I mean, it's just educating people. People make purchase decisions and don't know fully how it affects them. And that's just educating people.
Could the utility commission look into what Mark is talking about?
My suggestion would, let's set a meeting in the near future, and let's have a lot more discussion, and then decide what type of committee. Let me look into it, let me have discussions with staff and Phil and see the best way this is handled.
I just want us to pursue it because it's been brought up 3 years, and to
I'm not
at
against
least
that.
revisit the policy. It's not necessarily that we definitely want to change anything, but we need to revisit it to just figure out, do we have the best policy or should it be changed? That's my point, is that we've asked about it several times.
I have a question for Phil because I was taking notes. I know, I've been trying to get a word in for a while. When you said 2.4 cents and you said 10.1 cent, 4.2?
Yeah.
Okay, see, I was trying to write too much. What was that?
The 4.2 cents is what the JRDA charges us for energy. That's our avoided cost. So instead of buying that's the value of the energy that the solar panel is making to the city. And so when we pay the city 10.1 cents, it's twice what we can buy it for from the city, from the GRDA.
So you buy it for 4.2 cents from,
GRDA.
or, but I'm referring to the people who have the solar panels. You buy it from them for 4.2 cents.
Yes.
And then you sell it back to them for 10.1 cent.
Yes.
Okay, that was,
That's the new buy-all sell. Now, there's some that's grandfathered, and what rate are we paying them?
10.1.
See, that's the problem right there.
and that's where, like my friend was saying, they get charged, and she couldn't remember, $20 or $30 a month for the infrastructure, so that other electric customers aren't having to cover the costs for the solar people, which if it were $30 a month for 40 customers, that'd be $14,400 a year that the city would get back from
But they're
that.
buying just her excess. Our city's buying all
No,
of
no.
yours
No,
and
I-
making you pay for it.
No, I totally understand that.
Yeah.
But the last conversation we had, there was a question over, well, then the rest of if we did it the way it's done somewhere else, the rest of the customers would be having to pay for the electric and the infrastructure, whereas for the people who do the buy-all, sell-all, or the net metering, they pay an infrastructure fee that goes to the electric company. Okay.
Alan, then I think back to you, you're going to.
Yes, we'll have further discussion and
Yep.
try to get questions, and
Perfect.
we'll get back with you on that. Just moving along really quickly, short-term goals, a lot of these, like we were talking earlier, we're already doing, a lot of things on your list we're already working on. I already talked about crosswalk over 412, that's in progress, and we're talking to RDAT. Development, one of the goals is develop a master sewer plan. That will actually, you will see that in this year's budget, so that will come before you tonight. And then the other is improve Benton Street and Benton Street Park, which will hopefully be a part of the study for Park and Rec as we work on that part. And Benton Street will be on our master street plan. So again, Mayor, we have food. Is there any other questions there? Just real quick, anything on your list you may want to bring up?
I'd like to talk about the traffic at the school.
That was my question is, I cannot stress enough that, and I know you're wanting to get to budget, Alan, but I think we've got to finish goals tonight. And there's 2 or 3 things we have not talked about. And we were talking about accidents. If there was an emergency, there's no way at Mount Olive and Sherwood Whitlock you could get a fire truck, because at 3 to 3:30, 3:45, it's backed up so much. And I want us to have a goal that we work with the schools, the city staff and school staff, to promote them, with our help, building more parking in front of their school, at least in front of Allen, to get the traffic off the highway. I know it's a state highway, but it's in city limits, and we've done stuff on it before, and it's just a mess. It's something that, I've asked about it for 3 years, and pretty well just not had anybody else get behind it, but it's something we've got to do. That is a massive, massive mess. And it's not just in front of those 2 schools. It's a mess on Tulsa Street in front of the Southside Elementary, where it's backed up down there as well, and further down Tulsa near the Arvest Bank. And so I think as much land as the schools have that is unused, we need to work with them to say, what can we do to fix this problem? And I want this to be a goal.
And
Alan,
again,
look-
I understand it, I see it, I drive in it every day, the police department, fire department. But again, it's really hard to tell with the school what to do on their own property. I've had many, many meetings with Scott, Chief, you can talk about it. We've done studies with the school I think we just completed a study last year or the year before. I know it was like my last year.
Yeah, so myself and Shane Patrick just sat down and we're working up some different ideas, especially when it comes to Allen. They're looking at different staggering times, start times for the schools to try to alleviate that going forward. So intermediate school starts at a different time than Allen and so on, so that there's not so much traffic in that area at one time. One of the other things that we're looking at is trying to figure out a way to make it to where there's no left turns into Allen, or the intermediate school off of Mount Olive, where they would have to go down Sherry Whitlock, make the big loop, and just go into each school right. That way they're coming out of the school and going left to try to flow that traffic. It's just the conundrum without setting an officer out in the middle of the street and saying no left turns for those times. But we're looking at different options that we have with what is currently there.
But you're talking about things we can do. And Alan had just said it's hard to tell the school what to do. I don't want us to tell the school what to do. I want us to meet with school staff and say, is there not some way we can partner? Because we used to have a whole lot more city-school partnerships on development of property, where they were building their schools, et cetera.
And we,
There's got to be some way we can suggest that with all the property in front of Allen Elementary between the highway and their current parking lot, it should be, that parking lot should be double the size. And so I'm just saying because what the cars do, they get off and they meander in the parking lot to be able, because there's so many kids getting picked up and dropped off. And so I'm just saying, is there not some way we can get with the school and say, can we partner to help build some parking lot? You guys and us share the cost to do this, to get the.
and I hear you, and Shane and I are having and have had that same conversation, whether or not that would even fix the problem. And I'm going to venture to guess that it won't, because of the left-hand turns into the school. It doesn't matter how big the parking lot is, as they still have to make a left-hand turn, traffic's going to back up into the intersection in a matter of minutes, especially when you have them fighting for the same turn lane to get into the intermediate school and to get into Allen. And that's where we see the big conundrum when it comes to the traffic.
The problem is that there's only so much room for the cars to drive in the parking lot. And if the parking lot was bigger, then more cars would be able to get off the highway, left turn or not. Maybe make a separate entrance further around the corner for that school. Because you're right, having an entrance for both schools right next to each other is a pain. But what I'm saying is they have a great deal of land they did not utilize, and this would be one way to get cars off the highway, because there would be more room for the people to get off and pull in the parking area.
Yeah, and I said
I've only
before,
brought it up because I've asked for 3 years, and
Shane is looking at that. And,
Good.
I'm not an engineer, but there's some issues with the drainage and things like that because of the slope of the hill and all those things. It's not just paving it and putting cars in there. So that's why it was taking a little bit for Shane to look at that as being a viable option. Because we even thought about putting a road in behind the schools, but because of the drainage issues and stuff like that, that would be millions of dollars to do.
it's a bad place.
Yeah, and I don't want to think I was ignoring it, Director.
I wasn't talking about you.
No, I don't mean in that context. I mean, it's their property, because we've had so many conversations, and I know that was one of my biggest headaches, and still is.
Yeah.
Is backed up traffic.
Yeah.
And my wife is subbing, and my son forgot keys, and I went through 2 school traffic. I'm like, I'm glad my kids are grown.
Oh, every year it gets further and further down Sherry Whitlock and down to the west around on Mount Olive corner, the curve, Mount Olive.
It's kind of like JBU and the school district the numbers are up. We have more people coming to school here. That's why, in the near future, they're talking about building an elementary on Kenwood Street and to alleviate some of that.
Right now,
we're in constant conversations about improving the traffic.
there's 800 kids just in Allen Elementary School. So, and 50% of them are bus riders. And 50% get dropped off. So roughly 300 to 400 cars a day.
We'll do a better job of keeping the board updated of those conversations
Thank
that
you.
we have. But again, that is a prerogative of the board if that's something you want to put in the short-term or long-term goals. But I just want you to know this is something that we are working on constantly, trying to.
The other thing I had down, and it doesn't have anybody supporting it, but the striping of lanes and crosswalks, you said there's already an annual schedule, but it's not getting done. They're not getting done anywhere.
This is something that, you know, with Steve retiring, I've already bent our new director's ear that we're going to try to get on this earlier next year, because I have a lot of the board members that call me trying to get that striping done, needs for crosswalk. So Kevin's going to be putting a plan together. He's going to be working with Steve until his retirement the next few weeks, just kind of shadowing and figuring it out. But this is something that we've already had a conversation, and it is very important that we try to get on this early as possible. And a lot of that is due, and not making excuses for Steve, but his team is very, very busy pulling off jobs to do this, because it's a three-man crew. We got to make sure we're getting on this a little bit earlier, and I've had those conversations with Kevin already.
Well, I actually have seen several crosswalks being worked on. There was one on 43 over the pipe that the kids were apparently going through.
That's a new,
The little tunnel.
that's a new sidewalk.
Okay, that's a new one. And then I
That's- I'm
saw
talking
one
about
being
old crosswalk and
redone over by the middle school just recently. It seems like two were redone over by the middle school.
I think Director Allen's talking about the painting,
Yeah,
mostly
the crosswalk
striping
paint
and
on the
painting.
striping.
Yeah, these
what
were
they're doing.
painting crosswalks.
Yeah, we
And I
actu-
just happened to notice it 2 or 3 times when I was out, so.
And it fades so quick, and Steve can tell you a little bit more, because it's easy for me to say, hey, to get this early. What happens a lot of times when they're priming or getting the streets ready for ice, a lot of that ruins the striping and fades it and makes it peel. So we got to be careful how early we can get on it. And I think the crews have been working on it since, what, Steve, July, early July? We started working on them in July, and it's painstaking, because you're out there and you can't shut the traffic completely down, got to wait for it to dry. So this is going to be a big thing for us to try to get on it
That's why I
earlier.
noticed it, because it was some pretty hot days. They were working on it too.
And I misspoke, Steve, that we can't do it because in the wintertime and things like that, because everything that we're putting down causes issues on that. I had to get my mind right on that. But we hopefully can get started on that earlier, because I do get complaints on that also.
And then are we completely abandoning the idea of pursuing the museum coming into the city?
No, sir, this is conversation, again, Christina and I had, and that's something where the board, has to make a decision. I don't know if you know the numbers off the top of the head. We just bringing the employees in at 12% and bringing in those salaries, and just with everything we have going on, is it the right time? Is it something the board's ready to do? Again, it's not as, and I don't mean this in a bad way, it's simple, but I've got to find a director that can oversee that. We've got to come up with ideas, because we're kind of stretched thin now as we bring people. So again, do you remember a cost estimate that we had, Christine? I don't put you on the spot. And I know we've had conversations, but again, that's something if the city decides to do and the board wants us to do that, we'll definitely look at it.
What was the 12%? You said something about 12%.
Well, whenever we take employees in, we bring in those salaries plus their retirement on top of that.
Oh, okay.
The fringes.
Okay, I didn't know what the 12% was.
And the fringes that come with that, where we don't do that.
Christina,
Christina, do you have
did you-
anything on
Put you on
that?
the spot.
No, I don't have those numbers, but I can get an estimate if I have an idea of what their salaries are. But we also have a very generous healthcare package as well. So it would add quite a bit to the budget.
Well, it was just on the list, and I just wanted to make sure that we had discussed, that you guys or whoever had considered it. So
Right.
that's the only reason I brought it up.
And you wouldn't know unless I told you, but I have actually, in our policy group meetings that we have, I've gone over this at least twice with staff, just saying, hey, this is what the board's looking at, this is what we need to start working on. So when you give me a list, I just don't, we discuss it, and we just try to figure out ways to fit these things in the schedule.
Well, I like that you gave us a list that had the staff lead. I guess you'd ask them, right, out to the left or to the right, But you only let each one have just one choice.
We're all in one conversation. But again, is there anything else?
Going back to the striping and crosswalks for a minute, because I'm one of the people, yes, who have complained about it, because I've gotten a lot of complaints about the crosswalks, and I appreciate that over on Progress and Tahlequah, that was taken care of. But then it's also made me start paying more attention, and it does seem like they start to fade pretty quickly. I would assume y'all keep up on this, so I guess I'm just asking, we have new technology, new supplies, new equipment, new everything all the time. Is there such a thing as a better paint that will last longer? Because, yeah, I noticed even over there at Tahlequah and Progress, I'm like, wow, that's already starting to fade, and it was just done.
Right. So typically, with our striping, we have either paint or thermoplastic. Thermoplastic is about 3 times as expensive, but it lasts about 3 times as long. The issue why we don't use it on a lot of the major streets is because of snow plows. So it's an actual layer. It's not just paint. It's an actual layer that adheres to the asphalt, and snow plows chip at it. So that's why we see just kind of standard paint on some of those intersections and some of those larger streets. Thank you.
Anything else?
Back to you, or
Okay, thank you. We brought some pizza. If we want to quake or grab a plate, we can get started when you're ready. Staff will be here available for questions. And again, if you have anything on goals, please shoot me an email. I'll be happy to try to find you an answer, and we'll have a meeting hopefully in the next couple of months on this solar. Okay.
perfect, thank you. We will recess until you all tell me you're ready to come back.
Until everybody's
Directors?
eating.
At